So really what we're going to discuss about animals is actually what makes them different. What do they have that's super complex? Why are they so much better, it seems, than some of the organisms that came before them? And why are they so much more evolved? And basically what makes them more evolved. So the first thing we have to look at is their parts. When a part is more efficient, it can do the job better, it can survive better, and that trait can get passed on. So the more efficient your parts get, essentially, those parts are part of natural selection. We'll talk about humans a lot because they're part of Animalia, and you seem to know most of the parts of the human, so it's a little bit easier. Some of the animals will share these parts and these systems, and some will not. It just kind of depends. But the big deal is that we have to know how these systems cooperate and how they work together. It's not just about memorizing the organs that are in each one, it's about actually memorizing the processes and then trying to figure out how they can interact with other processes and other systems so that it all works cohesive. So this is all happening in your body constantly. So here we go into the body systems. You may see them written a little bit different sometimes. Sometimes they'll say urinary instead of excretory, or lymphatic will be its own system, but it doesn't really matter. The point is that each one of these is not necessarily going to be its own separate little box. These interact and they have their hands and their fingers in so many different jars and they wear so many hats that it's one cohesive thing. They all have their own job and their own role, but they can interact and influence all of the other systems. So if you see an organ that is in multiple systems or it's doing multiple jobs, that's okay. They're not mutually exclusive. So think of it like a giant Venn diagram. Only instead of having 2 circles like we normally do, we have like 10 circles and they all interact with each other. So we could choose a space in this circle, like for example that little part right there, and it's part of that system, it's part of that system, it's part of that system. It looks super complicated because it really is. Body systems. You got the body system on top, kind of a little drawing of the system, and then all the stuff that's basically in that. You got nervous system, brain, spinal cord, peripheral nerves, neurons, integumentary, which is your skin, your hair, your nails, sweat and oil glands, circulatory, heart, blood, arteries, veins, capillaries, respiratory deals with breathing, nose, trachea, pharynx, larynx, bronchi, bronchioles, lungs. Most people just think of trachea and lungs, but it's dealing with grabbing the oxygen, getting rid of CO2. Anything that involves breathing is technically part of this system. Endocrine and reproductive are kind of squished in as one. However, they're really kind of two. The endocrine system deals with all of the hormones, the reproductive system deals with reproduction. Skeletal is all the bones, the cartilage, the ligaments, all the structure of your body. Muscular is what attaches to the skeletal and moves it all around. You have 3 types of muscle: skeletal, like a bicep, smooth, like the intestines, and cardiac, which is heart. Digestive is all about nutrient absorption. Mouth, esophagus, stomach, large and small intestine, pancreas, liver. If its job or its main purpose is to break stuff down so you can absorb it, it's probably going to have its hand in this system. Excretory sounds like the word excrete. You're excreting liquid waste. Digestive dealt with solid waste. Excretory, like sweat or urine, stuff with the kidneys, any kind of filtering to remove liquid toxins or liquid waste is going to be in this category. And then finally, immune and lymphatic system. Again, kind of squished into one because they just overlap so much. They do so much of the same stuff, you can kind of just put them in one little bundle. So those are our 10 body systems. Now, the reason these have to work so well together is because your body has to maintain some kind of balance. You can't just have chaos going on in your body. If something gets out of whack, your body has to be able to fix it. If you let something get too high or too low and you don't bring it back down to the normal setting, your body's going to get damaged and ultimately die. So your body has to be able to adapt to a lot of different surroundings. Let's do body temperature, for example. Our standard body temperature is 98.6, but you can get too hot and you can get too cold. It's gonna happen. Your body gets too hot, it has to deal with it. Your body gets too cold, it has to deal with it. Let's do too hot first. We'll do too cold in a sec. When you get too hot, your body has to get rid of this heat somehow. Your blood works kind of like a liquid coolant system. So for one thing, your arteries can get a little bit bigger to allow more blood flow to get rid of some of that heat. You're gonna sweat. So again, now we look at all the systems working together: integumentary, excretory, circulatory. All these things are going to start to bring your body temperature back down to our initial setting, our default, 98.6. If you get too cold, muscles will start to contract, which is called shivering, which creates a bunch of heat and can warm you up. The opposite happens with the arteries and veins. Here's my normal artery and vein. I want to conserve all the heat I got, so they start to constrict and they get smaller. This is why you get frostbite on fingers and toes and nose and ears, and they turn black and fall off. The body has kind of rerouted your blood to the important stuff: heart, lungs, brain, all the internal vital organs, which leaves your poor extremities out in the cold, literally and figuratively. The point is that this can bring it back up. This will warm you up. So it becomes this big circle when your body takes something that's too high or too low and loops it back to its default setting, in this case 98.6. There's a loop. There's a loop. It's called a feedback loop. The body is given feedback from the nervous system analyzing stuff, from feeling what's going on in the environment, from something happening inside the body, and it's saying, we need to fix this. You got a fever, got to bring it back down. You go into hypothermia, you got to bring it back up. Your body has to loop it. If you cannot bring your body temperature to a stable spot, eventually stuff is going to go wrong. Your body temperature can't function when it's too hot or too cold. But just within a simple thing like keeping body temperature regulated, we had all these systems interacting. Circulatory, excretory, they all work together. Same thing happens with the amount of sugar in your blood. Blood sugar can get too high, blood sugar can get too low. If your blood sugar gets too high, pancreas can produce insulin, which essentially sucks up sugar from your blood and brings you back to a normal state. If your blood sugar gets too low, we'll say this is too high, this is too low, pancreas can spit out glucagon. You don't really have to memorize these, just know that the pancreas will create these feedback loops just like we did for body temperature. Keep it regular no matter where it goes. Now, this is essentially what causes diabetes. If you don't produce enough insulin, which is type 2, or you don't produce insulin at all, which is type 1, you don't have a way to continue this feedback loop. You can have your blood sugar go all the way up, and your body has no way to pull it down. So people either have to take insulin injections, or have an insulin pump, or have some kind of artificial insulin put in their body so they can perform the feedback loop. So when I say regular or default, everything has a default for the most part. If I'm trying to keep something stable, it has that default. Sometimes you'll say equilibrium, but it all means homeostasis. It's all the same thing. Just like your body temperature, you can have something as simple as your house's temperature. You got your thermostat, and say you set it at 72 degrees. If your house warms up because it's really hot and it goes above 72, 72, 73, 74, whatever, your AC is going to kick on and it'll bring it back down to that 72. It'll continue to kick on every time it gets above that number. It's a feedback loop where you set your thermostat at whatever homeostasis you want. Now, if you want to do the same thing where you don't want it to get too cold in your house, you set the heat to 65. So if it drops below 65 in the house or whatever you set it at, the heat kicks on. So now you have a feedback loop on the bottom. So your house is basically protected from going too high or too low in almost any weather, which is the whole point because you're paying all that crazy money to keep yourself nice and comfy in your house. So while something like sweat or an increased heart rate or increased breathing might be kind of an annoyance because it's a response to something that you don't want to deal with, it's actually your body working really hard to maintain your balance. So, as long as we're throwing on deodorant so we don't smell like a locker room full of high school football boys, we're probably going to be okay sweating a little bit because it's a very important means to an end.